Odo catches 2 Euridians cheating at Dabo. Julian Bashir says it's heresy to even consider the possibility that a prion replication could be inhibited by quantum resonance effects. And Jake Sisko teaches us that the line between courage and cowardice is a lot thinner than most people think. Hey, everybody, and welcome to the 7th Rule with Cirroc Lofton.
Hello, hello.
We are joined by a very special guest today, director Kim Friedman. Welcome back.
Absolutely. What's up, everybody? I'm Cirroc Lofton from the 7th Rule podcast, and I'll be at STSF this year in the Bay Area, celebrating with our friends at Creation.
Okay. Cirroc's also from Star Trek Deep Space Nine. You might recognize him from that. And my name is Ryan T. Husk of the 7th Rule. You've got to go to this convention. It's March 8th through 10th, just south of San Francisco in Burlingame, right by the airport. You're going to love it. There are already well over 20 Star Trek and sci-fi guests, tons of panels. This is March 8th through 10th, creationent.com. That's creationent.com to get tickets and to get your hotel. We can't wait to see you there.
Yeah, I'll be there. Ryan will be there. And we'll represent the 7th Rule podcast.
And Star Trek Deep Space
Nine. I
Nine.
wanted to talk about the backdrop behind me a little bit so people don't think I've lost my mind. I'm in my formerly teenage daughter's bedroom. She's now a mother, an adult, and she's a mother herself we have a 5-month-old baby boy, but I hurt my toe this day, and so I have to stay in bed with my toe up and ice it. And I want to tell everyone how I did it.
In a surfing accident. Yes. Pardon.
Surfing accident. I wish I could say I was surfing off rocks and I hurt. No, unfortunately, surfing was great. And then I took my wetsuit off. And while taking my wetsuit off, I tripped and stubbed my toe. So, yes, I had a taking off the wetsuit accident. And so I'm trying to keep my leg up and ice it so it's okay by tomorrow morning. That's it. So here's my fancy little teenage bed. What did you say? I was like a Disney princess bed. Yes.
Yeah. It looks like we're talking to a Disney princess. This is great.
Absolutely.
And by the way, don't worry. We're going to edit everything out after surfing accident. That's it. It's official. It's canon. It was a surfing accident. Yeah. There was this crazy wave. You're out in Maui somewhere.
Huge wave, big wave. Yeah.
Well, even the fact that Kim, you're surfing, like you go out surfing.
I grew up surfing. I'm from originally, believe it or not, Atlantic City, New Jersey. So I was surfing since that's what you did. You know, there was really nothing to do. There was no gambling when I grew up in Atlantic City. So what did you do? As soon as you could allow to be in the ocean, you surfed. First you boogie boarded, then you surfed. That was it. So I grew up doing it. Yeah, always. I mean, I'm not surfing huge waves in Hawaii, but I love to surf.
But you will be once that toe heals.
Oh, yes, I'm going right over, yes.
By the way, everybody, my name is Ryan T. Husk. We're doing a review today of Deep Space Nine's Season 5, Episode 4. It's a good one, Nor the Battle to the Strong. Story by Bryce Parker. Interesting notes about him later. Teleplay by Renee Echevarria and directed by, what do you know, Kim Friedman.
AKA Disney Princess.
Today. The surfer, the silver surfer.
You're on the set of your new film that you're doing, the Sleeping Beauty.
The Sleeping Beauty of Disneyland. Exactly. Oh my God.
So Kim, you were telling me before we started rolling that some of the stuff didn't look familiar to you when you were originally watching it.
Yes. Well, when I started to watch it, and I literally rolled. I saw the opening scene where they were complaining about the gambling, and they were on on Deep Space Nine on the space station. And I actually rewound it back. I was with my daughter. I said, "Could you rewind? Let's go back." I said, "Wait a minute." I wanted to make sure that my name was on it because I'm looking at this scene truly, and I thought, "Have I gone? Am I senile? What happened?" I didn't remember. I said, I'm not sure I directed this episode. Oh my God, what am I going to do while I'm supposed to be on this podcast? And then we got to even in the spaceship, I was thinking, well, this is a little familiar in the ship, with you and Sadiq. But then when we got to the caves, then I remembered it. And I remembered it for reasons that are going to make you laugh and think a little bit.
Ooh.
Okay, when I got this script, Sarah,
Teaser.
I said, wait a minute. I know that all of Star Trek on TV and Star Trek movies, it's Shakespeare in space. Mm-hmm. There's monologues, there's soliloquies of words that are made up. So no one knows the words. It's impossible for the actors to read. We call it Shakespeare in space, all the monologues. I'm cool with that. I'm down with that. I prefer a little bit of the action stuff myself mixed in with it. When I got the script, I went, oh my effing God, because there was all this voiceover with your inner monologue, Sarah. And you were very young as an actor. I mean, you're very good, but still very young. And I thought, oh my God, not only are we going to have the monologues, not only are we going to have the action, but we're going to have this very young actor having to play these scenes without dialogue, where the voiceover is going to come, later on. And I was worried. I thought to myself, oh, either this episode is going to be wonderful or it is going to be a lemon. It's just going to be like watching paint dry, because how are we going to make, how are we going to make? So I remember thinking, oh my God, when we go to the caves, and we went and searched the caves on Bronson, in California, in Los Angeles, there are these caves on Bronson Avenue, real caves.
Right.
As I was going over the locations, I thought, well, the action's got to be great. And then the emotional things. I was so lucky, Sirach, that I had you and that I had Siddig to work with, because those scenes were hard to pull off. Most of the scenes, if you remember, were just two people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Talking, you and people lying on the ground wounded.
Like this one right behind me, yeah.
I mean, it was two people, and it was you all the time. You were in almost every scene. Even sometimes you were in the background. I noticed today in some of the action scenes in the hospital, you were in the background. I could see you, like tending to people. So I thought, oh my heavens, Sirach, he's so young. Okay, it's hard for an older actor to sit and act while a voiceover is playing in the background. I wondered, was this courageous? Did I run away? So when I got the script of this episode, I ran to the writers and said, wait a minute, are you sure we can pull this off? But we did. And it turned out great. I think it turned out great, but I was scared when I got it. I got to tell you. What did you think, Sirach, when you got the episode, when you first read it?
Well, when I first rewatched it, I actually was reminded of the voiceover part that you were talking about. And one of the things that stood out to me was one of my favorite shows growing up was The Wonder Years.
I knew I was going to mention that too. I knew it because they did so much of that. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, they did pretty much every episode had some voiceover work. And then there's a Christmas movie that I like, The Christmas Story, that they play every year about, you'll shoot your eye out, kid.
Oh,
yeah. Yeah, and there's voiceover in that as well, where he's, talking. It's in the adult version of himself, kind of talking about his younger experience. So I do like when it's used, and I like when it's used properly. Those are my two examples of
But as
shows.
an actor, what did you think about it when you read it?
I read as an actor, I said this is going to be a lot for me to do, because this was a big. This is my basically starring in this episode, and usually the voiceover work is reserved for like the captains. So right.
Or so certain logs, like personal logs, captain's log, chief medical officer's log. That's true. Yeah.
Right. And Worf, I think I remember him doing one last season, doing his own log. But very, very rarely is it done throughout the show.
Right.
It's only done at a certain point at the end of the show, captain's log, in the beginning or the end.
Right.
Right.
And this was all through the show.
This was all through the show. Yeah, and there's actually some parts where, like you're describing, where there's nothing being spoken on camera as far as you don't see any dialogue. It's all just thoughts and thinking, but the voiceover is kind of
right. Did we? I think we did we play voiceover, or did we just read it while you were shooting?
In my mind, you guys were reading, because I
think we read it. Yes.
Yeah.
I think we read the voiceover to you. Yeah, yeah.
I do think the voiceover was read because there's certain parts where you just have to react to something that's being said.
Yes, of
And,
course.
and there's no way I think I could have pulled that off without somebody reading
Right. Well,
what I
and
would
we
have been writing.
schedule on Deep Space, there wasn't time to go in and pre-record you doing
Right.
it, and directing you in the voiceover room and blah blah blah. So we just read it. I think I read. I think I read some of it. Sometimes the script supervisor read it, but yeah, we read it. But it was very difficult, especially for, not a seasoned actor. You're like, because you don't want to overdo it, and you didn't. Yeah, I think you did great. But when I watched it today, I thought he really was subtle. He didn't, because you can overact, like trying to play every thing that's spoken, every word, and you didn't fall for that. But yeah, I remember looking at the script and really worrying that it was going to be challenging, really challenging for you, because A is a big story for you, and it's sorry, I mean, it was a big story. B, it wasn't conventionally written, where you have scenes where you're talking about everything. A lot of it was yourself, self-reflection, very hard to play as an actor, just an over. And then the third thing was how to make this come alive, since there was a lot of voiceover and everything. And again, I have to hands off to you and hands off to Sadiq, because and some of the other actors as well that played in scenes with you, because I was lucky. I had really good actors. Yeah, it was really good, because if I had a lot of lemons in that cast, it would have been very hard to pull off the scenes.
And speaking of those good actors, there's a few of them that jump out to mind right away. The kid that played opposite me, who was kind of showing me the ropes on triage, I thought he was fantastic.
Well, do you have his name? I don't know his name. I couldn't remember I don't know which character he was. I couldn't figure it out from the credits.
I think his name was Andrew Kavovit. He played Kirby, I think.
Yes, I think you're right.
Kirby.
He was really good. He was wonderful.
Mm-hmm. Those.
He was.
A young Tom Cruise. I know that sounds insane, but he did. He reminded me of like a young Tom Cruise, very young Tom Cruise, almost like a preteen. But I thought he was good, and he kept that sort of sense of he was enjoying it. He was the opposite of you for a while. He was really enjoying it. Mm-hmm. The adventure and the excitement. He was feeding off of it. And you, of course, were the opposite. Yeah.
Here's the guy. It's a little dark, but this is the fellow right here, right?
Yes, that's him.
Yes.
Yeah, he was good.
Yeah, he was very good in this episode. The other person that stood out to me was the guy who shot himself in the foot.
Oh, wonderful. Oh, and the scene at the end in bed when you come over to him and he says, you understand, there's like an understanding between you. That was a fabulous scene. In fact, that scene, well, in the writing too, but it could have been like a little quote mark on it. Okay, we'll tie up, nice and neat, the theme of the show. But it didn't. The writing was good. I mean, I thought the acting between you two was wonderful, and it was pulled back. It wasn't like on the nose, it wasn't hammered. You didn't hammer it in. And I really, really liked the way the two of you played the scene understated. I liked the way I directed it, because there was a lot of action going on down there in the hospital and the thing. Yeah. And it was nice just to have this still scene with the two of you just talking to each other. And it wasn't acting. Me, Shrek. I hate when people are like acting up a storm. I mean, I hate it. And it was so in the moment. It was great. It's really, really good. And when I saw it again, I liked it.
Yeah. I did too. You mentioned subtle. There were a lot of subtle beats there. I think one in particular where he said, "I wished I aimed a little higher."
Yes.
And it was just like a throwaway, but he turns over and goes into a little curl up position. Yeah. But I just like the subtleties there. I thought it sold. It sold me. The other person who I loved was the guy who got shot. This guy who's behind Ryan.
Me too. I had to look him up.
He was fabulous. He was wonderful.
I was just going to say that's something I noticed was that this episode, I mean, it was different for a lot of reasons, and some of which you've already mentioned.
Oh.
But one of them being that there were a lot of day players.
Guess.
There were a lot of guest stars. There were. It was just like it was Sid, it was Sirach, and it was an entirely new cast of characters for one episode.
It was the whole, it was a universe of new people, of fighters, and the people in the hospital. The woman who played the head, I don't know, nurse or whatever she was, who had the husband in the she was excellent. And I do, as I started watching it, I go, oh, now I remember this. And I remember the terror, we're talking to the writers saying, are you sure? What are we doing here? But I also do remember the casting sessions. And, normally you cast, maybe one person, maybe two that have like a significant, really significant part. These are heavy acting scenes for quite a lot of people in the show. So the casting was quite intense the week of, more than a week, like 10, 14 days of prep. There's a lot of casting going on. So, yeah.
Right. There's this gentleman who has been in multiple Star Trek episodes on multiple series as well. There were the three doctors, one of which was kind of showing Sirach the ropes. There was the lady, and there was the Bolian, who I thought was really good with his understated humor and delivery. There's the guy that shot himself. I mean, that's like 5, 6, 7 characters that all have meaty roles.
Was like, his voice was just incredible. I mean, I can't remember. I wish I could know his name. He
almost sounded like J.G. Hertzler, but he looked completely different. But he had that same, rasp in his voice a little bit.
Yeah.
The actor's name is Mark Holton. And sadly, the character name is only Bolian.
He was wonderful. It's interesting.
But he brought that character so much life and made it memorable and stuff. I mean, a lot of people come on and do guest starring roles, and they, sometimes they're not memorable. You walk away. Yeah, and this guy was totally believable. He kind of was like the John Candy of Bolians. Who was
yes. And he stood out in the midst of everything going on. You remember that character. It was an episode of really good. We had really good casting sessions, and I'm remembering now. We were very concerned about it because when we have the regulars on Deep Space Nine, you've got Sirach, you've got Avery, you've got Nana, you got Rene Auberjonois. You're in as a director, it's Shakespeare in space. It's wonderful. Yeah. Suddenly, you have a multitude of people who you never worked with, right? I've never worked with any of these people, and boy, did they come through! Amazing. I'm glad you brought that up because they're amazing. Yeah, the Bolian was just, every time he was in a scene, you went right to him. It was like, he was great. The John Candy of Bolians, yes.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
And, you don't give yourself enough credit, Kim, because one of the things that you do really well is explain things when you're on the set. And I noticed that when you're working with the actors and you're working with people, you want as much information.
I try. Yeah.
Out there. Yeah. And that actually helps to me. For the actors, for everybody involved, so that we all know kind of what space we're in and what place we're in. And I think you do an excellent job of explaining things in those kinds of simple ways, which made it, I'm sure, a hell of a lot easier for these people that guest starred in this episode.
Yeah, I did, though. I must say this. They were all in a lot of action-driven scenes. And I always feel badly because I know as a director, no matter how much I try to, focus on the actor, when you're on a television schedule directing and you've got a lot of action work, explosions and running and this and the hospital and running around, you do have to spend a lot of time, more so than in a scene with two people talking to each other, on the camera work. So I always tried as best I could in a situation like that to give attention to the actors, because you have to remind yourself, that's what's going to carry the story, not an explosion. So, yeah, it's hard. By the way, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead, please.
Go ahead.
I was just going to
say.
You're not going to get me this time.
By the way, just so you know, and this is for Sirach too, the caves are real caves, totally uncomfortable. I mean, those aren't soft rocks. Those are real rocks. The ground is not solid. I was really worried about Sirach and Sadiq running through the grass and the trees because we just found like places on the hillside. It wasn't like, it was not like a movie where you manicure the set and you have very nice pathways for the actors to go. I was keeping my fingers crossed. When we did a location scout, we tried to find the safest places to run and the rocks in the cave, but it was a very rugged location. So that's also made it very hard. You probably, because you were younger, maybe didn't think of it as at all dangerous, but it was not the easiest location. Yeah, you were there.
No, it's funny you say that because I remember as I was watching this episode, there's a scene where I'm rolling down the hill. I'm like tumbling down. And I'm pretty sure I volunteered for that. Like, yeah, I'll do that. Yeah. And then as I'm watching it, I'm like, I don't think I'd do that today. That's.
Oh yeah, no. There were rocks, and I mean, when you location scout, I try to go over every path, and I try to do the blocking that I'm going to give the actors and the camera people. I'm usually with one of the camera people, and we talk about it. So we're going to do down this hill, but like, do I roll down the hill first? No, I don't, and so my fingers were crossed though, because it was really rough terrain. It's very rocky, very hilly. It's the Hollywood Hills, and it's not manicured there at all. And then there are these caves that are real caves with dirt bottoms and rocks on the bottom and rock all over. So yeah, go ahead now. It's your turn.
Well, that's actually exactly what, there were two things. One was that I said that I was going to want to talk about the stunts more extensively after the break. But right now I wanted to finish up talking about the location, which you actually were bringing up anyway. Do you remember if there were any other choices when you were kind of picking where to do this shoot, or was it kind of Bronson Caves or bust? Or was it just like a perfect place that you said, we don't need to look anywhere else?
Well, I knew the Bronson Caves, and the location manager certainly knew the Bronson Caves because we're not the first movie that is shot there. But I also knew the Bronson Caves, and I said, well, I think it would really be good. One of the things about the Bronson Caves that is so great is that, there are not a lot of caves in LA close to the studio too, because we want to be close to Paramount. And Bronson Caves is literally up the hill from Paramount. One of the edges of the Paramount lot is on Bronson Street. So you have to drive up into the hills. That made it very attractive for us time-wise. But the other thing about the Bronson Caves that is interesting is they're pretty big. You can walk in them. There are some places you have to duck, but you can pretty much walk in a lot of those caves. And I wanted to do action. I wanted stretchers going and people moving and running. And so I knew those caves also with a little bit of ducking down in places.
Especially for Sirach.
Yes, for Sirach, yeah. But you could run through. And I also knew that it was easy to get permits, to shoot up there. But what I was worried about was I didn't really know the bramble, I guess you would call it, the brush around it, where Sirach had to go down a hill, where there were explosions, where they were running, through things. And we had to find spots that were safe, safe, as safe as we could think that they were safe. So, yeah. But I think we certainly went up and scouted it. We didn't say we're going to use the Bronson Caves, but once we looked at it, yeah, that was it. And actually, the only other choices in LA like that, there are some old subway tunnels that I have shot other things like this in, old subway tunnels that look old, they look old. We've had to mask certain things. And some of these tunnels aren't used anymore because there was like a prior trolley or subway system or something. It's more downtown LA that we use. That's one section. And then there are just road tunnels that you can only shoot in at night, actual like tunnels under Mulholland Drive and stuff. And they can be, with set design and props made to look, okay. But if you got a cave, that's the first choice.
And it's right down the street. That's so perfect.
Right down the street. And I knew it, the camera people knew it. And once we got up there, I started planning, I said, oh yeah, this was no need to look any further. And the other places all need to have, set dressing brought in to make it look like more like rustic, and we'd have to have two locations. So yeah, it was Bronson Canyons was a quick yes when we got there, and we looked around. We were there a long time. I remember we went once location to pick it, and then I went back on the weekend I think by myself, to plan my shots. And I remember it was like, oh my God, the cameramen are going to kill me. I mean, it's just like, where do you put the camera, the dolly? We did a lot of handheld stuff because it was just too hard to put track down and stuff like that. So yeah.
Well, we're going to take our quick break right now. For everybody at home, we're talking about the caves. I'm going to do a quick share screen here. If you recognize this is the Bat Cave, the infamous Bat Cave. It's also been used in the past in other Star Trek episodes, like the one, I can never remember what it's called, but it's Star Trek The Next Generation, where Beverly and Picard are kind of joined at the mind. And every time I say that, everybody yells out the title. I'm like, I'm sorry, I don't remember it. But so this is it's an iconic location, and it worked just perfectly for this episode.
When we come back, also, I want to talk more about Soraka, the acting, too, if we can.
Oh, we will.
Yeah, me too.
Good.
Usually, Sirach's like, oh, boy, here we're going to talk about but now he's like, all right, I'm ready for it. Here we go.
Oh, no, I
don't mind. I don't mind.
All right, so we'll take a super quick break, and we'll be right back on The Seventh Rule. Hey, everybody, we are back on The Seventh Rule with Sirach Lofton.
Hello, hello.
Also joined by superstar director Kim Friedman in her Disney princess bed.
Yes, I'm in my daughter's Disney princess bed. Long story, stub toe, surfing accident, but not really. I stubbed my toe. Hello, hooray. So my foot is up on ice. But let's talk about Soraka, this fabulous show.
Well, before we do, let's knock out these trivioids that may or may not have made the cutting room floor. Here they come in random order. Bashir knew that his paper was controversial, but he had no idea it would turn the entire conference upside down. Bashir says it's heresy to even consider the possibility that a prion replication could be inhibited by quantum resonance effects. Bashir and Jake get distress call from the Federation colony of Agila Prime. Quark makes a terrible decaffeinated Ractigino. Abolian tells Jake to find some place else to stand. Odo catches two Uridians cheating at Dabo. The Rutledge and the Tecumseh are heading things up for the counterattack against the Klingons. When the Klingons get mad, they forget about their disruptors and go hand to hand. Sisko spends 3 hours tweaking the pattern buffers in the Defiance replicator systems, and Jake Sisko teaches us that the line between courage and cowardice is a lot thinner than most people believe. A lot of good stuff in that one. So,
wow, that was an unbelievable recap. All those words. I'm impressed.
I only knew what half those words meant anyway.
No one does, but it's okay. You make them work. I just want to say something. One thing that I was really upset about something on this show, that I didn't have more Klingons for the fight. I had there weren't enough Klingons for me. I wanted to see more Klingon fighting. I had the Klingons fighting a dead Klingon on the ground, and then I had the Klingons getting trapped with the rocks, coming down. But I do remember saying, "Wait a minute, I got an episode with Klingons, and I'm only going to have a few." I was disappointed. I love Klingons. I wanted more Klingons. So that's that.
More Klingons is always better. That's
more Klingons. My role in life. That's my goal. My motto now. More Klingons.
More
you can
Klingons.
never have too many. Yes.
No, there's as I was watching this episode, there's a line in there that kind of sums up, where I'm at in this episode as far as mentally, and that is, I brag about being 18, right? I think Bashir says, Bashir's like, you're too young, you can't come on this trip, and I hit him with, I'm 18. And
I'm a big boy. That's it, man. I'm a man.
I'm man now. I'm ready for anything.
Yeah, and that's exactly what a child would say, right? Somebody who's a kid. I'm old enough to stay up late.
Of course,
I'm old enough. Yeah, I'm old enough to do this or do that, and so that actually kind of sums up where I'm at. Actually 18 probably at this point. I'm sure they matched it up, but I felt like this was a young Jake kind of going through his old experiencing manhood in this really toughening situation, right? He even says at some point, I'm a Sisko, as if, because I am a Cisco,
Right.
I'm genetically prone to survive disasters and be a hero, right?
I'm the
So I
emissary's
like
son.
those. Right, right. So I should be able to kick ass and take names. That's just what I do, or that's what we do as Cisco's. Um, so I like those kinds of approaches that the writers took as far as really showing that Jake is new and naive and fresh at this, and this is something that he's not going to be forgetting anytime soon. This is going to leave an indelible mark on him, and also give him a kind of eye opening into who his what his characteristic, who he is, what he's made of in critical moments. And I thought that's one of the big lessons in this episode, because I think at the end of it, it says, on one hand, when it came down to it, I ran, but in another hand, and
Yes.
it was all about survival, right? So it all came down to survival and the choices that I had to make to survive and what I thought I had to do to survive. And those things can either appear to be cowardly, or appear to be courageous.
Mhm.
And I love the way that they did that episode, is writing this particular theme, because I think DS9 does such a good job at coming up with these themes of morality and touching upon them and explaining on them. But I wanted to ask you, Kim, this is such a confined space. So we're doing this triage. It's not big,
Oh, no,
and
small, tiny.
it's a tiny space, but yet you made it feel like there was a lot of things going on. I wanted to talk a little bit about how you do that. How do you trick the audience into thinking?
Okay. But first, I wanted to say something about you and the acting. I have to say this. Well, first of all, there was one thing that we haven't mentioned yet in the writing, which is it was a terrible choice of Sadiq. Sadiq should not have taken you, right?
Yes, yes.
Dr. Bashir should not have taken you. I understand
not without permission. So, in my
not without
opinion,
permission,
he would
and
call he would call
probably
back and say something. That
yeah,
would be the right thing to do.
that was Dr. Bashir, a little bit of a wrong decision. Once you were there, though, and it was very interesting. I kind of I don't bring this up facetiously, but you know the Wizard of Oz. There's the Cowardly Lion, the Bert Lahr character of the Cowardly Lion, and I actually talked to the writer Renee about this a little bit because it's a significant character in that he doesn't think he's brave, but yet he is, in his own way that he is brave. So here is this young person who shouldn't be in this position, and what he's doing, even though he thinks he's being cowardly, is very brave. And what he's doing what I felt as a director, when you ran, because you did run, you ran the opposite direction. I hope to show that. It was hard though, because all the bramble looked the same there. But when you ran away from where Bashir was, to me, it was survival. I didn't even think it was really an act of cowardice. It was
instinctual.
Instinctual survival kicking in, and a very adult thing to do, because what good would it have done if you had been blown up? You couldn't have helped Bashir then, right? So if the explosions were all happening in front, which they were, I would run. So I thought that was a really good survival instinct to do, and really wasn't cowardly. I understand, though, why you, as a young man, would think, wait a minute, I'm supposed to be with Bashir. I'm supposed to be helping him bring the generator back. I understand, but I didn't think it was. The second thing I will talk about the cave and the tiny space, but I want to talk about your acting. How old were you when we did this episode? Do you remember?
I'm sure I was 18, 17.
You were just 18. Yeah, you were that age. Yeah, I think you were just about that age. Yeah. Again, I will have to say that you were superb in the scenes where you were talking to someone. And I expected nothing less because I'd worked with you, enough. So I knew that you're a wonderful actor and you could do the scenes. I was very impressed that you were able to pull off, again, the scenes with the voiceovers, because those were the scenes where you were really questioning your masculinity, if you were old enough, if you're mature enough, if you're really a Cisco, all of those things. Well, I mean, to me, That's an incredibly hard thing for any actor to do. It's reacting. They say acting is reacting. Well, what's the ultimate reacting? You're reacting to your own voiceover, not even being your own thoughts. Your own thoughts being voiced by or some script supervisor, reading it to you. So I thought that was a huge challenge, and I was really impressed with the way you did it. And now, many years later, looking at it, I was even more impressed. So I better start seeing you on TV soon. That's what I got to say. We went to rock back. Now, let me talk. We were in a tiny space. It was a little space. There were spaces where I'm 5'5.5", and I couldn't even stand up. And it was so. What I did was, the way to look like there were a lot of people in a small space is you cram lots of movement. I did catch one mistake. I caught one extra and the bullion running away and then appearing in the next thing. There was one little. The only way I could do this was I constantly had people moving in and out.
We need a tie for Kim Friedman right here for that thing. This is the nitpick tie. When we find a tiny little
hysterical.
Nitpick, it's the nitpick tie. No, that's a great one. Nobody noticed that. Anyway, please continue.
All right. So anyway, so you have people. What I did was I had people constantly streaming in, and I had, remembered which way they went in, and then had them streaming back in, with new stretchers. And sometimes it was the same person on a stretcher, just face up, and then they would come back in with a new stretcher, and it was the same person, but it was face down, and we put a blanket over them because, you can't have unlimited extras on a budget, But I constantly, while scenes were going on, had the same people, triple people in, out, moving, up, down, machines, so that there were constant movement in there. So it seemed like there were other rooms. Now, where they were going to was probably outside and right back in. I don't remember exactly. Right. There was no room for them to go anywhere. So probably they went through an entrance, came right back to another entrance, but I constantly had motion going on. So it seemed like people were in different places, but they weren't. That was the only place we had that time. So I feel as a director, you're in a tiny space, pack the frame. You want the composition, you want the frame to be packed with people. Sirach is talking to someone like that's wounded on the floor, have stretchers going by, blocking him sometimes. People blocked him while they were talking. People behind going out, in. That's how you get the feel of, a lot of people in a tiny space. Just pack the frame constantly. Never just have, there might be a scene where you have two people because you want a close up on someone. But in general, while the two people are talking, you want the frame packed around them and stuff. And I did lots of things where the camera would start like on an IV bag or something, some medical equipment, and come down to someone else. And then a stretcher would pull over there, and then you come to the action. So that you have to create movement in the scene. That's it.
Worked great.
Yeah, it did work great, and it kept it alive.
Yeah, Sirach, I have to be honest, when I read the script as a director, I was like, oh no, what am I going to do? And also limited, you never have unlimited budget. You can't have hundreds of extras, right? And then we're in the tiny caves, which were right for the thing. So I thought, oh, I got my work cut out for me here. And but in general, if you pack a frame, you have people in the packet with all kinds of things going on and lots of movement, you can create an atmosphere where you think there are other rooms and lots of other people in other places. But I do remember them, the poor ADs were constantly throwing blankets over extras and putting hats or whatever on people. It looked like the same people kept running back and forth.
Put them back in. Put them back in.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Also just to cover the acting a little bit more, and there are a couple things, Sirach, that I kind of wanted to talk with you about specifically with the acting. But one was working with Sadig specifically as a scene partner. I mean, you worked with Avery a bunch of times. You worked with Aaron a bunch of times, but even Column with Chief O'Brien, there were those times in the second and third season. But this was one of those rare occasions where you got to work with Sid playing Julian Bashir.
Right, Bashir, yeah. Bashir was never really in scene. Yeah.
Right. It seemed like a really good give and take. And I wanted you to kind of talk about how, if you felt more comfortable working with him, or if it was just another day on the job, or what that was like.
That's interesting.
Well, for one, I want to give Sid his credit for this episode as well, because I thought he was fantastic.
He's fabulous.
He took charge. He was commanding. I loved everything he did, except for the decision not to call Cisco and ask, "Hey, can I take your son along with me on this?"
Yes, I know. To a battle zone. Yeah.
Yeah, to a battle zone.
Yeah, but again, I want to repeat what I said. I don't know if I said it on camera or with you before the thing. I was very lucky that I had Siddig and I had Sirach in this episode, that these were two people that I had, because they could pull it off, because it was a tough episode to pull off. And again, the supporting cast too. But yeah, Siddig was wonderful.
Look, it worked
What did you
beautifully.
think, Sirach? How was it? How was it playing off of him?
I love playing off of him. I think Sid is he's really generous when he's performing. He's fantastic. I mean, just the degree of difficulty for the medical terminology and the Star Trek medical terminology. So the combination of the two, which are just as hard as it gets.
Impossible. Yes.
Yeah. He pulls it off just seamlessly, and I think it's a beautiful thing. But I love working with Sid. This episode felt like we had a real camaraderie and chemistry, where there was a trust factor there, and also kind of like, even though he didn't call Cisco, it felt like your uncle or your relative that lets you drink a beer or something. Right. Parents are not around.
Yes.
That's
good.
And it felt like that's the kind of role he was taking with me. Like, all right, I'll let you come along, right along on this one little journey with me. So I did like the chemistry. I like the idea of him writing this thing about him. So he had a reason for, they placed a reason for the two of them to be together.
Right.
And I also like the scene in particular where, I was hesitant when I came back from running away, and I was hesitant to kind of see Sid, because I didn't want to own up to the music. I was, maybe he saw me run away and he would call me out on it. And that little hesitancy and that moment of trepidation. And also the guy we were talking about, the kid who played
Tom Cruise Jr.
Opposite. Yeah, Tom Cruise Jr. His casual, and he's like, "Oh no, he's in there. I just saw him. He's awake. He's fine. Go talk to him."
Yeah.
And Sid really, in that moment, I thought he was fantastic, because he was sitting there, kind of brooding over where's Jake. At least that's what I felt.
Yes.
He was laying awake in his bed. He could have easily have been on an IV or been put to sleep, but no, he wanted to he's like worried, and I felt that
he thought you were dead.
Yeah.
And imagine the ramifications.
Yeah.
Telling Cisco.
He's thinking, what am I going to do? This is the worst thing ever.
How am I going to tell Cisco that I got his son killed? I got his son killed. He was worried about you and thinking, oh my God, what if he's died? How will I ever tell Cisco? It was,
Right. I played it back. I played it back twice, because there were two things that I was watching for when looking at that scene. First of all, when Sirach's about to walk in, I was looking forward to it. I was like, oh, I can't wait to see what Sid's reaction will be when he sees him. And we were treated to two things. One was, like you said, that 2 or 3 seconds of watching him, there was definitely some acting going on before Sirach came in, and it was really perfect.
Oh, yeah.
And then when Sirach comes in, he says, thank God. There were two moments there, and they were both perfect. Really liked them.
Yeah. It was great. I really, really, really liked it a lot. Yeah, I got to say, the acting really, the actors took over on this one, because it could have been a lemon. I have to tell you, not because the writing was good, but it was a different kind of Deep Space Nine. And it could have either been a lemon or really interesting. And I think it came out really interesting and not a lemon. So I lucked out.
Yeah, there was a moment there when the guy who had just fought off the Klingons, who scarred my face, when he says, "Don't let me die on my face," don't let me die looking at the ground.
Right, I want to look at the sky.
I want to look at, and that kind of hit me somewhere. It hit a nerve. he sold that to me. And the other thing that I was completely sold on was Cisco, in that scene where he's thinking about Jake. He said, I used to watch Jake when he was a kid sleeping.
5 years old. When you were 5 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And all of us as parents have had that moment where we sit there and we just watch our child
Right.
sleep, and you think about all of the things you want for them, and you think about what they're going to look like, because they always
Right.
change in their looks.
Mm.
And there's so much that you have going on in your head. But he says in that moment, he says, no matter what, I wasn't going to let anything bad happen to this child. And we've all had that kind of, moment where that's your job as a parent. Like, I
Right.
can't let anything bad happen to you. I have to be here to protect you. I'm going to be here to make sure you get back up. I'm going to make sure that you don't put yourself in a position that's going to compromise you. So those were all moments that I really felt were hit hard in this episode. And I want to credit Renee for the dialogue. There was a lot of good dialogue in this particular episode.
Very good. Renee did a great job writing this. And I believe me, I went into Renee like, just, okay, Renee, you got to help me here. This is like, and I know I love the scenes and stuff, but I said to him, are you sure we're going to pull this off with the voiceover? Because there's a lot of voiceover in the show, a lot of Jake writing, and thinking about it. And he was very confident about you, Shrock. He said, I know he can. And I said, well, he's got the chops, but there's a lot of it. There's a lot. I said, I hope that, I was also worried, not just about you pulling it off acting wise. I was worried, was there too much voiceover in terms of you writing this article about Bashir? Was there going to be too much of that and would it weigh down the action? But I thought it was the perfect blend. Looking back at it now, it's easy to look at, but it came out really well. But again, I'm still was amazed when I just watched it again today before we started this. And I have to say, what's interesting? My daughter, who was a kid at that point, she was 7 or I don't know, 8 or 6, whatever. She watched it with me this afternoon.
Yeah.
And we were watching it together. And she said, wait a minute. She said, how old was he? And I said, I think he's 17 or 18. He was a teenager. No, he couldn't have pulled that off with the acting. I said, no, he was still a teenager when he was playing, that age. It was very, very, very impressive. Very impressive acting work for you at that age.
And to piggyback on that, by the way, that kind of leads me into another thing. Not on top of the acting, Sirach, there were stunts involved. Now, going down that hill, okay, I actually had to look that over 3 or 4 times. I'm like, they picked somebody that looks almost exactly like Sirach. I was not able to tell it was you, other than my own logic saying there's no way they would risk that. but they did. That guy did a perfect job. But there were some stunts that you and Sid actually did do, like when you're walking out of the caves and there's the explosion and you drop down to your knees. I mean, that is a stunt. And I had to watch that a few times. I said, there's no way they can let these guys do that without knee pads. And I had to look really closely to see the little bump in the pants. They were thin knee pads because you guys have tight pants on. Like you didn't have like the big turtle shell skateboarder knee pads that people usually use for stunts. You had this thin little thing. Do you remember any of that?
Yeah, I do remember that. And actually, there's another point there where I jump over the desk when the Klingons are kind of approaching, and I jump over to escape fire. I remember those small stunts. I was working with Dennis Matalone, obviously the great stunt coordinator.
Oh, my Dennis Matalone, our wonderful stunt coordinator. I love him.
He's amazing. But, at the time I'm 18, so if there's one thing I can do, it's something physical. I can jump, run, fall down a hill.
You said there's a stunt person on the hill. I know.
No,
I think you did it. He ran down that hill. He insisted. I remember.
Really? So that's why, because I went back 3 times. I was like, how did they find somebody that looks exactly like him? So it really was you.
Him.
That was me rolling down that hill. I remember that. I actually wanted to roll down that hill. I insisted that it was me. I said, no, I'm going to do this.
And nobody talked you out of it.
I remember Dennis. Wait, Dennis had to convince me. Dennis Matalone, my Danger Dennis. Yeah, he had to convince me to let you do it. I said, what are you talking about? He's going to break something. And then, they convinced me and you did it. You did it.
Wow.
I did it. I pulled it off. In the line of Avery Brooks, who's done way more stunts than I have. That was pretty simple and pretty easy. The difficult part, more than the physical thing, is the small things and you know, those moments where you have to portray certain emotions or have small intimate conversations with people.
Yeah.
I think the best thing that I took away from this episode was what Cisco says to Jake at the end, and I love the way this episode ends on
Wonderful scene.
a wonderful scene. The two of what where you're actually he's reading the story of what had just occurred. And I think Cisco says something to the effect of, the real courage is looking inside of yourself.
Right.
And that was like just
fabulous.
so great. Yeah.
There was one other thing though that I have to say. You're a young actor. You're 18 years old. You're working a lot in Deep Space Nine. You were in lots of episodes, lots of scenes. But you were surrounded by, I think, by the way, and some people have sort of said, really? And I said, oh, yeah, one of the best acting ensembles ever assembled in TV. I mean, Renee Aubergenois, you don't get better than my wonderful, dear departed Renee. I mean, my God, Tony Awards and blah, blah. Avery, my God, like a giant. Nana Visitor, who I, by the way, worked with before Deep Space Nine in several plays. Fabulous actress. Colin, one of the best British actors. I mean, just read Siddig. I mean, you just keep going on and on. They just get better and better. So as a young actor, it's wonderful in every episode to be surrounded by this wonderful cast to anchor you in scenes. Well, in this episode, Sirach didn't have that. He didn't have he had Siddig in some scenes, but really most of his scenes were with these guest stars who he had never worked with before. And that's hard for a young actor of 18 to be in not one, but like three or four different actors playing scenes. I was very concerned going in about that because not that I think you ever use the cast around you as a crutch, but how wonderful it is to play scenes with such seasoned actors. It's a wonderful thing. Now you're with guest stars who I thought were wonderful or I wouldn't have cast them, but I've only seen them in one casting session. You don't really know what they're going to do. You get surprised sometimes for the better and sometimes for the worse. I hadn't worked with any of those people before. Now they're on a set and you're in multiple scenes with actors you've never worked before and you're 18 years old. So
rolling down a hill.
Well, no, the rolling down a hill was easy. I remember telling Ira, I remember going into Ira and saying, Ira, he's fabulous. He's pulling off all these scenes with these guest stars he's never worked with before. And I mean, I was amazed at how good you were in each of the scenes. And Ira, the producers were all just like, yeah, he is doing it. Because that's tough. It was a different episode. You didn't have your cast, and also the cast you were used to working with around you. You're 18 years old. Suddenly you were all these new actors. It was like having new scene partners in an acting class. You did really, really good.
Thank you. I want to credit everybody that you mentioned earlier. I had the greatest group of people that I can learn from, and you learn by osmosis just by being around such a talented group. And it's not just the people in front of the camera, but it's everybody involved behind the camera as well. Absolutely. It's the writers, it's you, Kim. It's everybody who's contributing. I had really good mentors and teachers to learn from. And if there's one thing that I was really good is being a student, that I can take credit for.
That's great.
So I was very good at studying and learning from these people. But I also think the writing was there. There were things as I was watching that I felt like if I could reperform, I would do differently. But I will chalk some of that stuff up to being young and inexperienced.
Yeah, you're 18.
Yeah. But there are things, there are beats that I wish I could play differently or moments that I would obviously change.
Of course. Yes.
That's what we do. We're critical of ourselves, and we find those things, those small things. But as an overall, I was pleased with the episode. I thought it was fantastic.
I want to ask you a quick question. Were you ever in an episode that Renee directed? Because I know Renee was directing some episodes. I was dying to go to the set one day. I wanted to watch him work because he's such a good actor. I thought, wow, I want to see him work as a director. But I was always working on something else at the same time. I never got to see him. Were you in any of his episodes that Renee Oberg directed?
I do believe I was in his episodes, and if I also was there when he was directing, because I'd be taking classes on the set days that I wasn't even in an episode, so I'd still be able to see who was there. But yeah, Renee's, when you have that expertise in acting, then it's easily translatable over to directing, because
absolutely.
You know what to look for, you know what you want. Avery is another example of somebody.
Avery's a wonderful director. I did get to watch Avery. Yeah. I did get to watch Avery direct. He's a wonderful director. Wonderful.
Absolutely. And I think that just having that extra acting background just makes it so much easier for the directors. But this episode, I thought you did a fantastic job, Kim, especially working with all of those things that you had. You had a new location, you had all these guest stars, and you had a young kid who's basically starring in this episode. So you had all of those challenges.
It was all on your shoulders.
You knocked it out.
It was really on your shoulders. And I remember saying, to the writers, I said, there's a lot to put on. He's a young actor. He's going to be slammed, but we're going to push through it. You did it, and you know what else was really interesting? I think some things that you see maybe now when you watch the show and say, oh, I wish I would have done that moment differently or something like that. It actually worked for the episode. Because some of the things that you might have been more slick doing if you're older or looking back now, I think kind of worked for the awkwardness of what you had to be feeling in the episode. So some of the stuff that you might have thought about differently, I think it was better to less is more. Less is more in this case, because the awkwardness and maybe the kind of not playing every beat, there were moments where it was like you didn't know what to do. I think that worked for the episode. I really do. So even though you may look at it and say, oh, I could have done this or I could have done that, I think you pretty much nailed it. Yeah, I do.
Oh, yeah, he did.
Yeah, there were some times where I felt like I looked shell-shocked. And
Perfect.
Maybe you're right. I probably played it differently.
What a deal.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we do have to run and go to our free-for-all in just a second here. I do want to give a special thanks to Carmen Shamwell, PJ Thomas, TJ Jackson Bay out in Missouri, Bill Victor Arukin. I was pausing there. Homer Frizzell, Eve England out in Wales, Dr. Anne-Marie Siegel, Dr. Susan B. Gruner.
Hi, Dr. Anne-Marie Siegel. Hello.
Tim Baum and Titus Moeller. Also, we do want to give a huge thank you to Kim Friedman. We've got the free-for-all next and some fun things to cover there. What's a
free-for-all, by the way?
Well, you're about to find out.
I can't wait.
Well, thank you all very much. We'll see you on the other side on the free-for-all. Always remember the 7th rule.